think we're live.
Yeah.
Welcome everyone who has joined in, and if you haven't joined in yet, we will continue on without you, but we'll hopefully see you around on the interwebs somewhere. But welcome to the first Global AI podcast, which is being hosted from down under at the moment in Australia. So we've got a bunch of us out here living a close to COVID post-normal life. And this is what we've kind of cooked up throughout our lockdown and what we ended up coming together with. So we've got a bunch of us here who have banded together. So we've got me down in Melbourne, Akancha here. We've got Arafat and Somi out in Sydney, and we've also got JK out in Brisbane. So we've got all of us together, and I have definitely just started to hear myself in other places. I'm going to turn that down. But with that, let's actually jump into a few introductions. So my name's Akancha Malik. I'm a Microsoft AI MVP in Melbourne, and I work at Telstra Purple as a data scientist. So I've been around in the community in Melbourne for about 2 years now and have met all these fabulous people that we're going to talk to tonight. So Arafat, maybe you want to jump in here as well and tell us a little bit more about yourself today.
Yeah, so I'm Arafat Tessin, and I'm Microsoft MVP for AI as well. Three of us and Somi with us have thought about the idea that we have seen a lot of good events going on in the market and within the same region as well. But what we were missing over here is the discussion from the experts who are working in AI space. So we wanted to get their opinions on whatever is going on. So that's why we have started this, and we are lucky to have Stefano as our first guest, who has been here in the community for very long. He has been MVP, he was RD as well, and now he's a part of Microsoft. So we would love to hear from Stefano. Stefano, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hey everybody, and thanks for the introduction. Yes, indeed, as you guys have been very active in the community, I am as well, especially in the AI, in the artificial intelligence space. Previously, as you mentioned, as an MVP, and now as in Microsoft. My role is in the Azure confidential computing. So we are trying to build a confidential cloud, a more secure cloud. Think of protecting data and code when it is in use. We all familiar with the concept of data encryption at rest, data encryption in transit. This is encryption or protection of data when it is actually used at runtime in memory. So this creates an environment that is completely invisible from the outside, even to the cloud provider. Not even Microsoft can access this data. And there are many use cases where this technology can really help creating that confidentiality. Also, when applying machine learning algorithm, and machine learning is more powerful and more accurate in its prediction the larger the data set is in input, right? So sometimes institutes of any type, you can think of financial institutes, health institutes, have their own data set because they have their own customer, their own patients, and they are unlikely to share it with others for confidentiality and privacy reasons. But what if they could, without taking a risk of leaking confidential data? And this is where confidential computing enter in action, in providing an environment where multiple parties can share the data set in absolutely confidentiality with zero risk that this data can be leaked, and still provide a combined data set to a machine learning service for improved accuracy of prediction.
Wow, that's amazing. And I mean, especially for all of our problems at consulting, where 90% of our conversations with clients are usually, is our data safe? Like that makes a lot of the problems immediately go away for a lot of the concerns.
Is my data safe? Who owns the data? Who controls the data? Is Microsoft looking into my data? And we still don't trust the cloud because we don't trust the cloud provider. In this case, not even Microsoft can access it.
Yeah, that's right. You have rightly said that everybody is scared of their own data as well. That, oh my, is why I'm seeing these ads. So we'll come to that point.
Yeah.
So since we have started as a part of AI for Good initiative, so and
Yes.
you have done a lot of work in that space, Stefano. So would you like to tell our audience or our listeners what is AI for Good, and why do we care about it right now?
But look, thanks for bringing this up because I strongly believe that we are all very privileged people, especially because we live in a beautiful country. But but we have access to education, we have access to services, so we have access to to yes, to services in general that other people in less fortunate situations don't have. And in our privileged position is our moral right to give back to society, to create a better society, a better world for the future. And as we work with technology, and especially artificial intelligence technology, there is always that concern how AI technology can be used to make an impact on the society. Are we using to make money, or are we using to improve the world? And the two things can go along. One doesn't exclude the other one, but it is our responsibility as data scientists, data engineers, data architect, AI specialist to make sure that we use technology in the right and the best way possible. So I got sort of passionate on the application of AI for good, which is sort of an umbrella for describing application for artificial intelligence for Earth, for the environment, for example, or for health in response to COVID-19, but not only in also in providing a safer environment for unlocking innovation in medicines. I have a personal experience of AI for accessibility in using a device like HoloLens for augmented reality, describing the world around, and cognitive services like object detection, computer vision, face detection, voice synthesis, for helping the blinded, so visually impaired people, to have a description of people and place and objects around them using AI, using the computer vision, a camera, a microphone, speakers, to engage with virtual eyes in some way. And there are other aspects of AI for good that have been particularly emerging lately, and Microsoft is very, takes this very seriously with some initiatives for humanitarian action, for example, supporting people in vulnerable communities or cultural heritage. So to preserve culture, language, history, monuments, where there is a challenge of preserving this sort of humanitarian background, culture of our own world. And I mentioned before, the use of AI for making money, for profit, doesn't exclude doing something for good. And I want to take the opportunity to promote a few grants. So I'm speaking about money here, dollars, for startups, non-profit organizations that have a great idea on using AI technology according to these good principles. So if you're out there listening to this podcast and you work for a startup, or you have a brilliant idea for using AI for improving our world and make it happen, so just search for Microsoft AI for Good, and you will land in the AI for Good website by Microsoft, where you have access to information around these programs and the possibility to submit your idea and participate or access some grants that Microsoft makes possible to develop your idea, your application. AI for grant to support climate change, AI for accessibility, to make the world more accessible to people with some sort of disabilities. And there are a few other ones on the website.
Cool. So I think you mentioned a lot of stuff there that we can try and unpack now, which sounds great. I think one of the bits that you mentioned throughout the AI for Good stuff that Microsoft doing, that I've seen recently at least, was the product that they've released around visual disabilities, about helping people be able to guide around their environment a lot better. Like, that's kind of my favorite one at the moment that I've seen that has come out recently. Is there one that you'd be willing to share? One that kind of sticks out to you?
It does, yes, and also because the application is immediate. You see immediately the impact on people getting benefit of a combination of a device like a smart glasses, where you can use the cameras and speakers. A camera will capture the environment around and then send the picture to the cloud, where in Azure Cognitive Services that can automatically detect object, describe object in plain English language, detect face as well, so they can say Arafat is in front of you, or if the person has not been recognized, because obviously you need to instruct the service with a list of your friends and colleagues and family to be able to recognize people. If this is a stranger, it will just tell is a man, 40 years old, is and some other attributes, including emotions. It can tell you if you're smiling, if you're upset, if you're surprised. It's fantastic because it really enabled technology to describe with the use of just a camera, a simple camera. It's not anything fancy. The world around in plain English language. And then obviously there is a process of voice synthesis, but this is something that has been around now for years and years. Turning text into voice and speaking this in the ears, in the speaker, so that people can understand and see what's going on. Now, the beauty of this voice synthesis now is becoming so natural that you can't recognize that it's actually a robotic voice. I mean, there are some times where some sentences are unbelievably perfect. The accent, you can choose, you want an American accent, you want a British accent, you want an Australian accent, you got it. Male and female, obviously. Speed, pitch of the voice, but also the intonation. You want something a bit more formal, or you want something a bit more enthusiastic. They can all do that. It's fantastic. I mean, unbelievable, really.
Yeah, so this is good. If now, as you have talked about the neural speech and the speech which is very coming closer to the human parity, if I'm a developer, if I want to develop such applications, applications which involve AI for good, which I can, like, if I want to build something for people for all the abilities to read, to help them read the text, which they cannot do that, which they cannot touch or hear, or other problems. So how can I get myself started easily without to learn a lot of heavy stuff? And how can I do with
good question. Thanks, Arafat. And you're right. Sometimes the challenge is, okay, this sounds fantastic, but then how do I do it? I'm not a data scientist. How do I access this technology to make it available to a broader developer audience? And now, let me tell you more than that. It's not just for developers. That's the fantastic thing. A few months ago, Microsoft launched an initiative for secondary schools here in Australia called AI for Good in Schools. And students of that age, 14, 15 years old, I believe, were using a Power Platform, which is a low-code or even no-code solution for building apps, mobile apps, really, that use AI. They are students. They are not data scientists. They're not even developers. So they may know something around JavaScript, they may not at all. I mean, 14 years old, when you were 14 years old, how many programming languages did you know? Probably nothing at all. I don't remember when I started. Probably I was something like 14, 15, but let's not go there. The point is, this technology is accessible now, even without being a developer. Now, obviously, if you are a developer, then you have the potential of exploiting this technology in much more detail. But the reality is that you can do power apps and integrate the power apps, so no code solution, building a mobile app, completely visual way. A bit like you're building a PowerPoint slide deck, and you arrange some components on the screen, and then you connect to an item, to a component that can do form recognition. And this has been pre-trained. So hundreds of engineers in Microsoft has done all the collection of data, labeling of data, training of the model, and publish it for you to use it. And you have to do nothing else except putting this together into a slide, they're called screens, in a Power App, and publish it. Option number one. Now, option number two is, yeah, okay, but I'm a JavaScript developer, I'm a Python developer, I do Node.js or C#. I want to have a bit more hands-on, but still, I'm not a data scientist. That's okay, because all these services, specifically the cognitive services that I mentioned, for face detection, voice synthesis, are published as a REST API, completely hosted in the cloud, serverless. So you don't even have to provision a virtual machine, database, containers, nothing. There is an endpoint, you register, so you obtain a key, and then you start using it in any programming languages. Now, there are a few SDKs, software development kit, optimized for .NET, for Python, but really any programming language that can submit a JSON payload to an endpoint over HTTP will do the job. So incredibly accessible. Now, if I may, to extend the story, these APIs can also be personalized. For example, computer vision recognize objects, but hundreds of engineers at Microsoft have very likely tagged over 10,000 objects around the world, but there is still yet another object that has not been classified, right? How do we make it personal to your specific use case? Well, you can. Computer vision is a close cousin called custom vision, where you can actually provide your own images. You tag the images, and tagging is really like this is red, this is yellow, this is green, whatever the tag is, whatever the label is, and then you click the button, train, and you're training the model. You don't have to write any code. You don't have to know any Python or JavaScript or any other programming language. The engine will do all the image recognition for you, and then again provide a web service to consume in the cloud without any infrastructure. This works for computer vision, so for images. This works also for voice, for translation, for text analysis, and a lot of other services that can be even personalized to specific domains and use cases.
So you mentioned a lot about how accessible it's becoming, right? And I'm such a big fan of that. Like, democratization of AI is like my favorite word at this stage. Anything that's to do with low code, I'm like, I'm here. I will cry about this to the end of the world. But it's also that kind of double-edged sword at times where even us as data people, like, I mean, I know how important it is at times. I'm not going to say I remember it all the time, about how important it is to make sure there's no bias in the data, or there's kind of making sure it's not doing necessarily more harm than possible good. But even making sure to remove those kind of biases, that's a skill on its own that, I mean, I'm still trying to understand and get my own head around. How do we then tackle that when we're essentially at the same time giving that ability to everybody without the whole background in it? Like, how do we manage those two really varying sides?
Yeah, look, this is a challenge, right? Because bias in machine learning or in general in the models that we use are a reflection of the biases that we as people have, and we source data that brings these flavors or these nuances, and not some others. For example, some time ago, I was working on a service for skin detection. So identifying some conditions in your skin, so to make some recommendation in terms of lifestyle or even product to apply to improve your condition. And this is a very specific application because you need to label thousands and thousands of images, identify the specific condition, the intensity of that condition, and so on. Now, inevitably, you cannot, it's quite challenging, classify people of every age, gender, cultural or ethnicity. So cultural background, yes, ethnicity. Now, it becomes too much of a huge job to implement. But then the output was that after training the model with these thousands of images of some type of people that have been classified, is that you have bias in your models, because as soon as you try to verify the conditions of the skin of a person that doesn't fit into the classes of people that have been labeled, your model doesn't work or provides information that is not correct. And now this was one example, but think in other contexts where we're not talking about skin conditions, which is important, but probably not the most ultimate problem, unless it is used for medical reason. But think about a situation where you apply for a loan to your bank, and then it will discriminate because of your cultural background. I don't get a loan because I'm Italian, for example, right? There will be a discrimination. Or car insurance. Let's debunk the myth that women drive worse. They don't. Actually, they drive better. But if your model is biased towards that kind of bias, that kind of myth, then insurance premiums will be higher for women, which obviously is going to be a bias to fight. Now, how do we resolve it? Well, one of the principles of building AI solutions is to be fair, to be inclusive, and to have accountability in people. So there is no such a thing as a computer can take the right decision for you. It is an algorithm written by humans that will take the decision. So we need to educate people that build these sort of solutions to follow some principles, some ethical principles of building unbiased application. So Microsoft, in building all these cognitive services that I mentioned before, follows 6 ethical principles of building responsible AI applications. Now, this is going to be a test, so let me try to go by memory. Fairness, by all means. So all the systems should treat people in a fair way, no discrimination. Inclusiveness, obviously. So all the AI system, all the AI solutions should empower everyone and not make discrimination one person over the other one, depending on ability or other conditions. Should be transparent, so we know what's actually happening. We not transparency necessarily as open source. Open source is a flavor, but transparency in a system should be clear, obvious in what is expecting in input and what is producing in output, without necessarily revealing how that happens, from an IP protection. It should be safe and reliable to use. It should protect the privacy of users and accountable. Yes, so these are the 6. People should be accountable for the system that they build. And this is the way you can resolve or at least mitigate a risk of creating bias system by making sure that you follow some principles and have diversity, not only in data, but also in the team that builds it. Because coming back to my example before, we produced a data set of thousands of pictures of women, white, middle age, to classify all their skin conditions. But if we had someone else in the team representing another background or another situation, they would say, look, this model that you're building is not inclusive. So we need to extend to consider this and this and that. Now, obviously, the example that I'm giving you is probably one of the bleeding obvious, right? I mean, obviously, there are people with different skin conditions or skin colors, and then obviously you need to account for them. But in many other domains, there can be some other features that are not that obvious, but still bring bias. So in that case, an expert or a domain expert will help emerge these challenges. So even your team, your development team, your data scientist team should be diverse, so to provide a richness of input in building systems that are less biased towards one schema or one model only.
Cool. So it means that what you are saying is, Vano, that Microsoft has come up with the responsible AI principles, and by implementing those, we can ensure that our models will be, if not 100%, will be more diverse and unbiased, or you can say that it is close to unbiased. Is if I have got an application, or if I've already got a model, or I have got a machine learning experiment, how I can add those how I can ensure that I add I follow all of these 6 principles. Are there any tools available for that? In let's say in Azure Machine Learning Studio, and do we have any SDKs?
So yes, this is part of the initiative now on a modern experience in machine learning to provide the sort of verification on all the different features. The possibility to analyze whether your model is unbalanced towards one feature or the other one. If the system will tell you you have too many of these attributes and too little of this other one, it's a warning. It's not going to correct, it's not going to fix it, obviously, but it will automatically inform you that your model that you're preparing, that you have labeled, that you're trained, is unbalanced towards a features over the other one, whether this is age, whether this is a cultural background, whether this is depends obviously on the application that you're building. Now, the challenge though that I see is that this is purely metrical. I mean, it's just informing you that some of these features are unbalanced. So, and it's a good thing to make sure that you have a good distribution of your labels across the different categories and objects that you have. But still, it doesn't reflect necessarily lack of inclusiveness or lack of fairness, because how does a system know that this feature is not inclusive, right? So this is something that only we humans can decide, and we have to use our best brain to do that. So I'm always be wary of sort of blaming the machines for not being inclusive. Machines do what we say, so blame the people, blame the humans, and make sure that this doesn't happen by creating diversity in a team, by creating conditions for testing all your AI solutions with a diverse environment, a diverse domain. So not just test within your QA team, for example, because it may be just a reflection of the culture of your organization anyway, but do a test that includes also different context, different organization, or different conditions that you probably didn't expect. It's not easy, but if you're building something of this level, you probably need to go beyond easy and make it a bit more robust.
Yeah, that is, I think, enough description. Whoever wants to get into this, I think it should be sufficient for them. Now, moving towards another aspect of our discussion, and this is about the community. So you have spent a lot of time in the community when it comes to the contribution. So how AI, like how a person who wants to use AI, how can they use AI to empower the community? How can they utilize the power of AI to help community in different aspects? What are the ways to do that? I understand that you talked about the democratization of AI using Power Apps and Microsoft Power Platform, which is very good. But what other ways should we adopt to do that?
That's a good point. I mean, everybody has different background and can bring different perspective to the AI story for a community. Akansha, you are data scientist, so you have or even an academic preparation on that. So you bring more of your hat, as I studied, I learn it, and now I'm using it in my job. And that your experience is great. I don't have a degree in data scientist. I taught myself the use of this technology from an engineering perspective. So my contribution was a bit more tactical or pragmatical, meaning as this customer has asked me to do this product, this solution, and I have addressed with this technology, with this cognitive service, and then I'm going to share this with the community and see, if this experience may help someone else. You may have instead more of an academic background and say, we study all these things because there is literacy around it, and then we share it with the community to spark some interest in that. Irrespective of your angle, though, one thing that I find very useful is start with a use case, or start with not a problem. It's not a problem. Start with an opportunity. What you want to do. Now, this is why I recommended before, go on the AI for Good application or website and come out with an idea. Now, it doesn't have to be necessarily AI for Good for sharing with the community. It can be also how to make online payment fraud detection, right? That's absolutely okay. But whatever your idea is, make sure that is addressing a very specific concern or requirement or opportunity. Then translate this into technology and identify what's the best technology that can help resolving that problem. Can be machine learning, anomaly detection, can be any of the cognitive services. So then get familiar with the technology and apply the technology to resolve the problem, rather than the other way around. The other way around, meaning that I pick a technology and then I try to figure out, what can I do with this? Okay, cool. I have this face detection. What do I do with this face detection? Well, yeah, it's okay, but as a community member, myself, I want to hear a story of success. I don't just want to hear a story of how to use an API. I mean, I can read these online. I can find plenty of YouTube videos. I can ask Arafat, I can ask Akansha, ask me, and I can tell you how to do it. What I want to hear from the community is a success story. how this technology resolve a specific problem. So start with a use case, and then apply the technology, and then share it with the community.
That sounds absolutely perfect. And I think along those lines of, and I was kind of thinking about this because community is important, and so many of the solutions and are being created through community themselves, that I definitely couldn't think of any. And Stefano, you might know some, because have you heard of any AI for good stuff? AI for good stuff. Oh my God. AI for good things that have happened around COVID in the last couple of months. And I'm shocked that I can't immediately think of one. And that might just be because I haven't really been on the social medias a lot over the lockdown, because that was just a bit too much. But if you do, that'd be great to hear.
Yeah, well, look, the aspect of COVID is a bit, challenging in some way, because there may be simple applications that you can think of, and there can be the broader thing of finding a vaccine to COVID-19, right? So that is probably not something that the community, I mean, why not? But this is probably not something that the community is involved. It's more for the big pharma. We may argue on that, but this is not the place for doing it. What we can do, though, is help all of us that are been working remotely, working from home, and being in a sort of lockdown across different countries, to use technology for improving these months where we've been in this situation. Now, we, as I mentioned before, we're lucky to live in a good country here. We are nearly COVID-free in Australia, but other countries nowadays, this is now December 2020 when we are recording this podcast, they are not in a great situation. So what can technology do to make it better? And there have been a few apps that organization or individual have produced and share with the community completely for free, to help people moving from office to home base. Just checking, just a checklist of security, for example, is your internet connection secure? Is your desk ergonomical to work? Nothing about AI, okay? But just enabling people to work in this sort of unusual way that we were in the past. And the application of AI then emerged also as a result of this working from home, because what happened is that with everybody being virtual or remote, a lot of activities that used to happen face to face, not even going out for a coffee, for lunch, all this chit chat that happens in the office, now they are a virtual coffee, a virtual lunch, a virtual something, right? And this produce data, produce more than an offline meeting will do. So brainstorming ideas is now on a whiteboard that is virtual and not in the office. If you used to stick post-it on the wall for your Kanban board, now is again virtual. If you used to take a coffee and chit-chat with your friends, now you do it online, and maybe you share a document, or maybe you send an email. So we've been flooded with an incredible amount of information that it didn't exist, it wasn't produced before, because it was all happening offline. Now, this should ring a bell to you guys as data scientists. Data. This is the foundation of AI. So the more data you have, the better it is, because then you can leverage an incredible richness of information to produce some insight, to identify trends and make some accurate prediction. I can think of stress management. How many virtual something you do every day? virtual meet with your manager, virtual meeting with your friends, virtual meeting with your mom, virtual meeting with your neighbors. Everything is virtual. How do you cope with the desire to be helpful, the desire to be connected, and the desire to shut up? I just want to have some quiet time, focus time, read a book. And so technology can help you. Technology can help you plan, set some priorities, auto reply to messages, block focus time, shut down notification, all automatically in a way that you can actually use, don't feel overwhelmed by a different way of engaging with people around you in this virtual world. So yeah, I mean, as long as you have data, then the sky is the limit, right? So you can really build a lot on top of it.
That's exactly the way to kind of think about it. The better it is, the more there is, the better it will be. And just in the comments and stuff we've got, actually, it's great to know humans still have the power of controlling machines and allowing them to make the human errors. It just mean, yes, it at times can just be a refreshing thing to hear again for someone who isn't constantly surrounded by this all the time and is seeing their own errors being thrown back in their face like I do every other day, where it's just like, nope, you made another mistake, go again.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
Yeah. So, as you were talking about virtual meeting with families, friends, manager, do we see any benefit of AI in social aspect? Like, do we have any social benefit for AI?
Now, look, I think so, yes. And being connected is a good thing, don't get me wrong, especially because we've been here. I mean, I'm based in Melbourne, so we've been through one of the strictest lockdown in the world. Apparently, you walk out because now we don't have any cases for several weeks, but it's been strict. And how do you make sure that you feel still connected? You feel still part of I mean, society is a big word in this case, but of the community, and not just the IT community. Also the community as your neighborhood where you live. Neighbors here have organized yoga classes online just to share and connect and make some connection that they used to do it in person and they couldn't. Some other ones I didn't attend. I was tempted, but I didn't. They organized some virtual poker. They used to play together poker and they couldn't, and now they organize these online games. So being connected is is a natural thing that we should encourage. Using technology to make it happen is a great use of technology. There may be an overuse, there may be an abuse, but this is why we have to go back to the principle of building responsible AI applications. And this is not just about AI, it's about the use of technology in general. There is a great book that I read years ago from Isaac Asimov about robotics. And he mentioned 3 laws of robotics that for me are still absolutely relevant, although that is fiction, is it's not an essay, but it's a novel. They still apply to the real world today, So the first law is that a robot, so think of a robot as an AI system, should not harm any human. And that's exactly, So the use of technology should not make people's life more miserable, should actually improve it. And then the second law is that a robot, so an AI system, should always obey the instruction that is given by a human. To your point, Akansha, before, we are still humans, we are still in control of technology, we don't blame the machines. We are accountable for it. And the third law is that a robot should avoid doing any actions or being in any situation that could cause any harm to itself and to people around. So that again is a condition to make sure that technology is not used for harming others and also to self-destroy itself, which is an interesting aspect of this story. No, is a way to say we use technology to improve people's life and to improve technology itself, to make it better and better, so that it becomes sustainable, it becomes more democratic, more accessible by everybody.
That's a great way of putting it all into like a little summed up way of wrapping everything out. And I mean, I think when you mentioned the whole virtual thing, yes, I am at one stage sick of all the fact the time I look at computer screens and forget how to make eye contact with people in real life now, because I don't necessarily have to do that on a camera. It's such a weird time that we're living in at times. But at the same rate, we get to do things like this. I mean, podcasts like this were a lot harder to get other people to get convinced to actually join things like this. I mean, I don't know if people in Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, across would have gotten together to be the co-hosts of a podcast like this had this not happened. But with that, there's also just so much choice and stuff. And I know we've got one other question that's come in for you, Stefano, which is around how do you juggle being all these things? You've got so many different caps that you wear. And I think this is a question that kind of goes to everyone, really. It's just everyone's juggling so much. How do you do it?
Somebody said you are Superman. What?
No. Look, it's all about finding your passion, right? And then when you do it, it doesn't feel like it is a job. I don't feel like I have to. I feel like I want to. I always applying I like to apply the 3 L's of in life. L, to learn something, so that you're always motivated to learn something new. Challenge yourself as a lifelong student, especially for us that work in IT. If we stop learning, we are out of job pretty much in a year or something. The second one is love what you do. So always make sure that there is so much that we can do in the world. If we do something that we don't like, what are we actually doing? So choose your passion, follow your passion, and love what you do. It's never going to be an effort doing it. You will find the time, whether it's 6 in the morning, whether it's 6 in the afternoon, or midnight. I have taken calls with the US at 2 in the night. I've taken calls with Europe, and it's all a matter of I do it because I like doing it. And the third L is laugh, as in take it easy, really. Make sure that whatever you do is not too serious. It has to be serious, but it's not a life-changing thing. Take it easy on yourself. Make sure that you always enjoy the journey. Is really having a lightweight approach to life, so that situation can happen. There is always a bigger design, and you will find your direction at the end. This year has been, I may be controversial here, has been a good year. No? Yes, of course, we all been living from home. Yes, of course, business and economy has been impacted. I lost my previous job, and then because my role was made redundant, and then I landed another job now at Microsoft. So overall, in that moment, you don't feel like that's a good thing, right? I say, what's going on here? But then, in the big picture, you start realizing how things are actually going. So always being positive, always being trusting the community. And look, I must say, I'm not Australian. I'm originally from Italy. I live here. I've been lucky. because I got the PR, permanent residence in this country, the day before they shut down the issuing visa, the 31st of March. I'm here because that happened thanks to another MVP that helped this happen. So without your network, without your community, you're not great. If you are part of the community, if you're part of the network, you are much more than an individual.
And that's a perfect way to wrap it up, because I think I've definitely heard this exact same sentiment almost everywhere, especially in the Microsoft community. And that as well, you're the average of the people you surround yourself with, right? I mean, it's exactly that process. So, I mean, this was kind of a selfish moment of like, yes, this is why I wanted to do the podcast. I get to meet all these amazing people. But it is true, like it makes such a big difference. And we would just say thank you so much for joining in. We've had absolutely amazing comments coming in, just saying thank you for sharing your valuable inputs. We had Dennis saying virtual technology has projected such an important role during COVID-19, as shows that this is the new community that we live in, that this is the new normal, and that you're making it kind of acceptable as we are, like just even hosting these kind of events. So with that, Stefano, thank you so much for jumping in and being our first host to come join us. Arafat, I think you've got a bunch of things you'd like to talk to us about, where we can be found and what we'll be doing next. Saying thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Stefano, first of all, for being our guest. We have started coming up on social, so if you are listening to us, please start following us. It's twitter.com/Global AI Podcast. So Global AI Podcast is our handle. And we will be coming up with our next guest in January. And the topic is going to be another interesting topic. This one was, it was AI for good. So we will be coming up with something else, AI for X right now. So we don't want to, like, I'm still in discussions with a lot of people. So once we are done with that, definitely we'll be posting in our social media. And so that's it from my end. Thank you so much for joining in, and thanks, Stefano, for being a part of this podcast.
Have a great of the year, everybody, and be positive. Next year is going to be even better.
Exactly. I look forward to joining in with our two other co-hosts, because they'll be the ones hosting the ones in January. So we've got Somi and JK, and you'll see loads of them about on social media. So with that, enjoy your Christmas and holidays, everyone.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.